All right, I'm Nick, out in the garage. I'm going to take a few minutes today and we are going to talk about two kayaks. We're going to compare them, one of which is the Old Town Sportsman Salty PDL and one of which is the Old Town Sportsman 120 PDL. Now we're just going to call them the Salty and the 120 PDL for the sake of the rest of the video. I'm not going to edit this. It'll be non-stop. We are going to ramble. I'm going to ramble. I'll probably say something more than once. It is what it is, okay? So we're going to start it off with, not all kayaks are fishing kayaks. Now you can fish from anything that floats. Kayak, john boat, float tube, floaties, whatever. If it floats, you can still fish from it. Air mattress, you could fish from it. It doesn't make it a fishing kayak. So the Salty, which was first introduced by Ocean Kayak as the Malibu PDL, was introduced as a recreational kayak, which was, I mean, it's pretty awesome for that, okay? Ocean Kayak doesn't produce it anymore. Old Town took over producing it, a sister company. They renamed it the Salty. They added flush mount rod holders, gear tracks, made the back maybe a little bit larger, and then they released it as a fishing kayak. It's not a fishing kayak. It's a great kayak. It's just a minimalist approach to load and go, throw and go, put it in the water real quick, put it in the back of your truck. You don't need a trailer most of the time. It's short, it's easy to store. It is lighter than the 120 PDL, but those things don't make it a fishing kayak. It's still a good kayak, but it's not a fishing kayak. Now the 120 PDL is more geared towards fishing. It has internal storage for battery, for rigging. It has pouches on the side and so on. So we're gonna put them up. We're going to compare them front to back. You guys already know, I'm going to ramble. I'm going to put some things first. Height, weight, region that you live is a huge deciding factor in what kayak that you use. For me, I've taken the Salty offshore. I've taken the 120 PDL offshore. The Salty did not do well in the surf. It punched through the surf the first few times. It was real nimble, real easy to drive around. It did it great. But the first time a big wave came over the front of the kayak, the whole front of the kayak filled with water, the little area I'll show you in the pictures, the cockpit where your feet go, all that stuff, filled with water, and the front end was sinking. I had to get out of the kayak in the surf, and then it floated back to the surface. So I don't recommend it for launching in heavy surf. You need something with a front end that's covered so the water rushes off the sides and can't just sit in the front. But we're going to put these things up. I have photos here so I can compare them to and zoom in so I can look at exactly what you guys are looking at. I have the 120 PDL. You probably can't, oh man, you can see the seat. It's sitting right here. Obviously, we've had it for a while. I do enjoy it for certain things. So, no more rambling. Let's get started. Front to back, all right? The Salty. Now, you will notice, first things first, there is a handle at the front of it. Now, on the 120 PDL, there is a drain plug in the front, which I find to be kind of weird because you got to tip the kayak up and flip it over. That's not how I drain the water out of there, if water gets in there, but that's for another video. The handle is left to right on the 120, whereas it is front to back on the Salty PDL. Either way, I'm not a big fan of either of those handles. The Salty is easier to move than the 120. You guys can see how much wider the 120 is in these photos. That means it's going to bump into your leg when you're carrying it. It's kind of awkward. It's kind of a pain in the butt. The Salty, it still does the same thing, but with the handle being front to back, you can grab it a little easier when you're dragging or moving around. Immediately back from there, you'll see the first major difference, and this is internal storage, okay? The internal storage on the 120 PDL is a pretty critical part. Maybe you want to put your fish finder in there, or fish finder battery in there, or maybe you want to carry an extra life jacket in there. Anything that you want to stay out of the weather. Maybe it's raining. Maybe you store rain gear in there, and you want to be able to get to it easy, but you don't want to get splashed while you're on the water. I'm a big fan of the internal storage. I hate the bungees because it's easy to get a treble hook stuck in there, but they don't have the click and seal lids anymore, so that's also a whole different video. I'd rather have the internal storage than not. Now, once you go over to the Salty, clearly there's bungees there again, cause a problem with treble hooks. And you have this area where, you know, they advertise it as, you know, maybe your dog can sit there. You could put a cooler up there, but putting weight on the front of the kayak is not smart. It makes it perform not so good, all right? It makes performance suffer. I don't like this. That is the area, and it's actually really deep. It's hard to tell in the photo. You can see the depth, but it is significantly deeper. I don't have one on hand to measure at the moment, but you could put multiple gallons of water in there. So like I talked about in the surf, when I plunged into the surf and the water came over the front of the kayak, it filled that area with water. Now, the Salty is not very wide, right? Width gives you surface area, which gives you the ability to have a greater capacity of weight. And this is why I said you shouldn't put things in front of the kayak. With it being so pointy, as soon as it got water in the front of it, it wanted to dive down, okay? Because that kayak's not wide enough to support all that weight. That's why I wouldn't recommend putting a cooler there. Wouldn't recommend your kids sitting there because it makes the kayak behave funny. Now that water did instantly flush out of there, but the wave was so big that it flushed through there, through that hole by the pedals, and right into my feet or the cockpit area. Now there are 4 scuppers there. It just couldn't drain the water fast enough, and a bigger kayak like the Big Water or the Predator, all of that water would have been instantly pushed to the sides of the kayak. It wouldn't have hit you in the feet. The kayak's wider, like the 120 PDL, which is also wider, and the water can't sit on front of the 120. Sorry, yeah, the 120 PDL like it does the Salty, okay? That stuff is super confusing. You think they would have named them something different. That's really it for the front of the kayak. Pedal drive, obviously they latch in the same way. They pedal the same way. The bins are different depths. You're not going to be able to see this one. The Salty bin, let me open this up a little bit. Yeah, the Salty bin is super shallow. The top water one is a little bit deeper. Not a big deal, not a deal breaker or anything like that, just interesting. Once you come back from there, you guys can see on the Salty that you have the gear tracks. The 120 also has those gear tracks, but the 120 has those rubberized mesh pockets, which they're only about 6 inches long, maybe 1.5 inches wide. But that stuff makes a pretty large difference. You can store quite a bit of stuff in there, maybe like a, just quick storage, a pack of worms, soft plastics, jig heads. Maybe you use scent on your lures. Maybe you want to set, your candy bar there for a second or whatever, okay? Maybe you got a pack of chips sitting there you're about to eat. Cell phone storage, something that stops things from falling quickly and just being at your feet. That's nice to have on a fishing kayak. You put your pliers there, your fish grips, whatever you need to put there, okay? Coming back from there, you have the same amount of scuppers there. The seat sits in relatively the same position. If you look really, really close, you can see that the handle is actually a bit further forward on the 120 PDL than it is on the Salty. You can see the cup holders are pretty much the same. I believe, can't see that one over there. I believe that one has drainage. I'm not sure if the other one does. Things that you just don't think about until you overly critique these things, right? Coming back, obviously they both have 3 flush mount rod holders at this time. You steer with your left hand on both kayaks. The Salty, you store the paddle on the left hand side, which is kind of down. In the front of the kayak, gets real pointy at the front, so the paddle kind of hangs out quite a bit, which is not necessarily exciting when you're fishing from it. The top water, or the 120 PDL, is the same. The paddle's on the left as well, but the kayak doesn't get as skinny as fast, so you kind of get away with the paddle being there a little bit better. That stuff's not important, okay? It's just something to note. As you go to the rear, and I'm looking at the photos on my cell phone, okay, just to make sure that I'm looking at the same photos you guys are. As you go to the rear, they both have giant rear cargo areas. They're pretty similar in size. I'm not going to measure them. Pretty similar in size. Obviously, they both have bungees back there. The only real difference in the rear of the kayaks, there's 2. The Salty has the carry handle on the left-hand side at an angle, which when you grab the kayak from the left, it will lean to the right, which makes carrying it with 2 people kind of awkward. Not the heaviest kayak in the world, just awkward to move around. The 120, pretty much the same design as the Topwater with a few differences. It has carrying handles in the rear. And obviously I've been doing this for a long time, right? It's hard not to call the 120 PDL a Topwater, so I struggle with that. It has carry handles built into the bottom of the back of it, so you can grab it with two hands, and it's like finger grooves, which is nice. It makes it easier to lift with two people. But when you grab it like that, you kind of got to do a little waddle. It is what it is. It's a good job, though. I'd rather have a firm handle than those screw-in handles. They flex, and I'm just not a fan. The 120 also has a power pole anchor area. The Salty does not, because it is a recreational kayak, not a fishing kayak. And that's just a quick broad range. I say quick, probably took 5 minutes to go front to back. That's just a quick layout of the kayaks, okay? Now you guys have both those pictures. You have thoughts that you may not have had on it. And overall, they're both good kayaks. If I wanted to go fishing, I would take the 120 PDL. People be like, well, Nick, I heard the Salty was the fastest PDL kayak they make. You can do 6 miles per hour in it. Yes, you may be able to do 6 miles per hour for 34 seconds. Congratulations. But you need to pedal it for hours. So it's not really about how fast it can go for, 20 yards. It's how fast you can go effortlessly and be comfortable all day. So yes, the Salty is, generally speaking, easier to pedal. Less torque will make it move through the water better. The front of it is rounder, whereas the Topwater kind of comes to a point. It's sleeker. It moves easier. It's 20 plus pounds or so lighter. Yes, it is easier to pedal. It's also not as stable. I was able to stand up it in some past videos you guys may have seen with no issues, but it does make it stable. I made a living in a kayak for a very, very long time. I've spent so much time in a kayak. Standing up is not a big deal to me. I'm 6 foot. I'm a pretty average person. I'm very, very comfortable in the kayak. That being said, I know the 120 is questionable on stability. Can I get away with it? 100%. But I can definitely stand up in the 120 much easier than the Salty. Without a question, I can turn around, do whatever I wanted to do. Plenty stable. If you are a bigger person and you start leaning in the Salty and your head gets on the outside of the kayak, you're probably going swimming. Whereas the Topwater or the 120 PDL, it is wider. It has like a pontoon style, or what they call a W style hull. It is more stable. It's going to serve you better, okay? It's also geared towards fishing. So if you are a bigger person, I definitely lean you towards the 120 PDL. If you are a tiny person and you want a minimalistic kayak that you can just pick up, toss in the back of your truck, storage isn't important to you. You're not going to rig the kayak. You're bringing a milk crate with 2 fishing poles, or maybe no milk crate at all. Maybe a soft-sided cooler with, your favorite adult beverage or favorite beverage. That's great. It's going to serve you wonderfully. If you're just going to go drift down a river, fantastic. Maybe you live on a body of water and you want to just be able to go pedal around in the sunset. The Salty is going to kill it. Maybe you live in Navarre, Florida, and you want something lighter to get off the beach. Calm days, you're not going to have any kind of problems. If you have a big break or the water is breaking on the beach, if you get water in the front of that kayak, you're going to have problems. Launching is going to be an issue. But going across the beach is easier than moving the 120 PDL because it's 20 plus pounds lighter. I could go on for days about a lot of this stuff. It comes down to personal choice. If you want a fishing kayak, I side with the 120 PDL. If you want something more, not going to rig it, simple, don't need the stability, don't plan on standing, then the Salty is perfect, okay? They're both well built. They have the same warranties. Excuse me. They have the same warranties. They're going to serve you well, okay? So that's that. Leave a comment below if you have either of those kayaks. Maybe you have both and you prefer one to the other. Maybe you had one and sold one for the other. Leave a comment below. Those comments really help other people. I mean, like when I watch YouTube, I spend more time reading the comments than watching the video sometimes. So comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Everyone appreciates it. If you have questions, you can shoot me an email at nick@navarrekayakfishing.com. Thanks for watching.